Today we're taking a look at my latest full frame camera, the Canon R8. If you're new to my channel, hello, my name is Paula and I've created videos about many different topics. My first ever camera from the Canon family was actually the R6 Mark I, which I then switched out for the Sony a7S III, and I've been loyal to it ever since. Occasionally, I would film with Brian's R6 Mark II. I also wanted to have a backup camera that was more compact in size and definitely lightweight and something that's easier to travel around with. Before we get started in today's video, I would like to point out that this review is mainly for people who shoot video first before photos. So if you're someone who is maybe thinking about investing into a full frame compact setup at a more affordable price, keep watching this video and see if the R8 is right for you. The EOS R8 is the newest Canon addition to the RF mount lineup as it was released in April of this year. This camera came out as a replacement for the beloved Canon EOS RP, but in our household we actually lovingly call this the baby R6 Mark II because of all the similarities and features that they have. The Canon R8 body comes in at $14.99 versus the Canon R6 Mark II at $24.99. The body alone on the camera is thinner than most cameras out in the market, and it weighs a whopping 461 grams. So coming in at just a little over a pound, you get a robust EOS system at a much smaller body. Out of the box, it comes with the LP-E17 battery and charger. Again, smaller body, smaller battery. You do have a USB-C port, so this could be another option for you to charge your camera on a pinch when you need some extra juice. It has one SD card slot, so that is something to keep in mind if you are out on a long shoot. It also has the mic and headset ports as well as HDMI, and like I mentioned, the USB-C port is also an option there as well. In comparison to the R6 Mark II, both cameras actually have the option to toggle between photo and video, which has been a popular feature that everyone has been asking Canon to do, and I'm happy to say that the Canon R8 has it as well. The R8 comes with a full frame 24 megapixel sensor, same as the R6 Mark II, and it also has the same autofocus system, which in my experience has had stellar subject detection. I also noticed that on the R6, the menu can be controlled with two options. You can use the touchscreen on the LCD display, or you have this scrolly wheel that is kind of fun to use on the back just to toggle in between all of your options. While on the R8, you also have the same touchscreen capability, but you're limited to standard directional buttons. It hasn't slowed me down nor sped up my process of workflow, so it really hasn't made a difference. It does the job. Both cameras have the option to have custom mappable buttons. And my personal favorite similarity between the two is that the R8 can also shoot C-Log 3 at 10-bit. This is a big deal to me because I have been trying to shoot in log more lately as I'm learning more about it. So having this option at a smaller camera is really what made me curious about this R8 in the first place. Next up, let's talk about the IBIS lens selection and recording. The R8 can record 4K 60 oversample from 6K. It can also record up to 120 FPS, but at full HD 1080p. With the full charge of the battery, you can expect up to 2 hours of recording time, up to 4K 30 FPS. It does cut it down to 30 minutes once you start filming at higher frame rates. Something else that will affect your recording time is the internal temperature on the camera. This camera does have the tendency to overheat. In my experience, we live out here in Las Vegas and we've been filming around here in the summertime. I have actually stopped recording in the middle of my filming session because this overheated. Granted, the temperatures out here were up in the hundreds, so this is not going to be a problem for everybody, but if you are someone who is filming in warmer temperatures, this is something to keep in mind, that this might not be the ideal camera to have, or might not be the only camera that you want to have. Another main difference with the R8 is that it does not have an in-body image stabilization. At first, when I got the camera, I thought that was going to be the deal breaker because I myself rely on IBIS very much. However, it did make me appreciate that it didn't have IBIS because of one thing and one thing only. No IBIS means no warping or wobbling. Now, Canon in the past has been known to have an IBIS on most of their higher end cameras that does have pretty significant wobbling and warping. As you've noticed here on the R6 Mark II, any faster motion, you'll actually notice some of the walls here curving, versus the R8, which does not have IBIS, it doesn't actually cause those wobblings. The R8 does come with optical image stabilization. You have two modes where you can stabilize your image, but because it's digitally stabilized, stabilizing, it does crop in a lot closer to your subject. Or consider other options, which are the lenses. So as we mentioned earlier, the R8 is the newest addition to the RF mount lineup in Canon. What that means is that it does have a sort of a limited selection of lenses, limiting it to the RF mounts. You can also use previous EF mount lenses, which just requires you to have an adapter from EF to RF. As someone who primarily shoots in front of the camera, whether that's for vlogging or for reviews, I prioritize having a compact setup. As I mentioned, I've been shooting with this a lot lately, and I'm using two different lenses for this camera. I use the 16mm f2.8 and the 14 to 35mm f4 RF lenses. Now, the 16mm is a prime lens, but again, most of my use case is for talking head videos and shooting different locations. So the wider the angle, the better. The only downside to that lens is it also does not have image stabilization. So you're doubling up on the lack of stability on your shot. So you definitely have to be really careful. Either use a tripod or have a really steady hand, or even static shots. Now, the 14 to 35mm lens has to be the best lens that I would recommend for the R8. It complements the size and weight of the camera body, and the best part is that this lens does have image stabilization. So combine it with the optical image stabilizer of the body, as well as the slightly wider 14mm focal length, turn on the stabilizer for the lens, you have yourself a very steady full frame image. Now that we know a little bit more about the R8, let's talk about the pros and cons of this camera. For a full frame camera that has a lot of the same capabilities as the R6 Mark II, but in the size of an APS-C camera, this is considerably a more affordable option. It has no recording limit up to 30 FPS. It has a lightweight body, which means it has a more compact setup. It is C-Log 3 10-bit capable, and it has custom mappable buttons as well. Toggling between video and photo, which makes it easy to switch from both modes. No wobble or warping because of the no IBIS. Did I mention it films 4K 60 no crop, where most cameras out in the market right now will have a crop at 4K 60. And last but not least, it has a 24 megapixel sensor, meaning that it makes for a great hybrid camera, whether you are a video first or a photo shooter first. And for the cons, we do have a couple things to keep in mind. First up is going to be the overheating at high temperature. I mentioned that as someone who lives in a warmer climate, definitely was limiting whenever I was filming in higher temperatures, because I constantly saw my camera quit on me in the middle of a shoot. So that could be something that's limiting to you. Recording limit starting at 4K 60 or above is going to be limited at 30 minutes. So if you wanted to do something for any other purpose that you need a higher frame rate for, you are capped at 30 minutes. I know I've kind of gone back and forth to how I feel about IBIS, but this does fall into the con. It does not have IBIS itself in the body. The kind of pro with that is that you do have optical image stabilizer, so you can turn that on to help you diminish the motion. However, it does have a slight crop. One SD card slot and a smaller battery, and the readily available lens selection for this camera is limited to the RF mounts. Now, I mentioned earlier that there is a fix to this. If you wanted to dive into an EF mount lens, you do have the option, but you would have to purchase an adapter as well. And again, because it's such a small compact body, that would add a little bit more weight, so it could potentially be a little too front heavy for this camera. Speaking of awkwardness in holding it, because it is a smaller camera, the grip could be a little too small for some of you who may have bigger hands. Canon does offer a screw-on grip on the bottom, which has no other purpose other than to extend the grip. So I guess one of the million-dollar questions for this camera is, who is it for? I personally think that this camera is best suited for someone who is looking to invest in either their first full-frame camera, or someone who is looking for a backup camera, maybe for B-roll as well. Now, if you're someone who's looking to start either photography or video, good news is that this would be a great start for either one because of that 24 megapixel sensor. It gives you great images for both photo and videos, and without compromising the quality from a beginner camera. Now, if you are a prosumer and are already starting to get paid to work events, I would probably skip this camera because of the limitations that it had that we mentioned earlier. The overheating is definitely going to be an issue. You only have a single slot SD card, so that's limiting into how much memory you can have. So if you fall into this category, I would say the R6 Mark II would be the better investment. So to wrap things up, I think that the R8 is definitely a great camera for the price. At $14.99 body only, this is probably the most affordable full frame camera packed with robust EOS features that a lot of its higher end counterparts also have. So hopefully this video helps make a decision on your next gear investment. I would love to know your guys' thoughts about the new R8, whether it's worth the investment as a full frame camera, or would you stick to other types of lightweight setups? I would love to know what your guys' thoughts are down below. Or if you're on the opposite end of the spectrum and are a little bit hesitant about the R8, I want to know what you guys think, so leave me a comment down below. If you like this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up down below. And of course, if you want to follow us along, be sure to subscribe to the channel and check out our other videos. That is it for me. I will see you guys in the next video.